Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to welcome everyone today. Um, or it's evening for some and morning for some other people. But I'd like to welcome everybody. And a few days ago, I was having a discussion with a layman here, and we were talking about our chanting and talking about uh, these different chants we do. And that sometimes people, do these chants and they don't really understand them because sometimes, we just chant them just in the Pali language, or sometimes we might chant them in Pali and Thai, or even, sometimes when we chant the translations in a language we understand, we sometimes don't really put much thought into them and don't really understand them. All right. And so I was saying how actually back in the old days with Ajahn Chah, when he had just started Wapapong, they were doing morning and evening chanting and meditation. And the chanting book was actually just in Pali. And then some after, and so they were just doing all the chants in Pali. And especially being a forest monastery, there weren't that many monks at that point who actually spoke or understood Pali. And then after a while, one monk had been away, he had been on Tudong, just wandering around, staying at different places. And he ended up finding this chanting book. And I believe it was Lumpur Buddhadasa who did it. And he translated the chants into Thai. So you chant in Pali and in Thai. And he brought this book back to Wapapong. And so Lumpur Cha really liked this. He really liked the idea of, understanding these chants, because a lot of these chants are, it's not just devotional, they're actually really important teachings, or some of them are actually instructions, like meditation instructions. So Lumpur Cha had, from then on, all of the branch monasteries and at Wapapong would do chanting in Pali and Thai. And then when they established Wat Pah Nanachat, the international forest monastery, we translated it into Pali and English. So we chanted in a language we understand. But I remember I was talking to one of the really old generation disciples or students of Ajahn Chah, and he was saying, he's like, yeah, before the translation, oh, the morning chanting was so easy. It was only about 10, 15 minutes. But once the translation came, there's so much more chanting to do. But but yeah, so it's important sometimes, just understanding these and understanding some of the meanings behind these teachings. So one of the chants that we do quite often in Wat Pah Nanachat, and is a pretty standard one in our tradition, is this one called the Five Subjects for Frequent Recollection. And so these are just as the name says, these are just these five subjects that the Buddha gave to us to reflect on again and again. Um, so the first one is, I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. And so this is a real great place to start, because, the Buddha had talked about when before he became enlightened, before he started practicing, he had this thing called the intoxication of youth. So it's one of those things, when you're young, you always feel like you're going to be young. It never really sinks in that you're going to get old. And, you never really think like your parents used to be young or the grandparents used to be young. But this aging is a natural process. This is just the way the body is. And, we're all subject to it. And I remember when I was first at Wat Pah Nanachat, at the time the abbot was Ajahn Nando, and he was very close to this one very senior, very well-respected monk in Thailand named Lumpur Blien. And he said once, Lumpur Blien said to him, reflecting on death is one thing, but have you tried reflecting on old age? Because, and my feeling on that was, sometimes death can be a little abstract, whereas old age is much easier to see, much easier to understand. And especially once you've started aging a bit, it's going to be much easier to reflect on. I remember last year, um, I was visiting one of my cousins I hadn't seen in about 20 years, and he's just a few years older than me. He was just in his early 40s, and we were chatting, and we were talking about all like the aches and pains we have in our bodies now. And my dad overheard this and just started laughing. He's like, "Oh, you guys have become old men already." And so it's it's one of those things. Once you start aging, then you can see it a little more clearly. But for a lot of people, it's something there's a lot of denial about. People can be really afraid of aging. And so even though there's a whole industry based around people trying to deny their aging, things to look youthful, to feel youthful, people spend heaps of money on plastic surgery or all these different things to still try to feel like they're young, to deny old age. But so the Buddha actually encouraged us to reflect on old age, and reflect on it frequently. And the next one was the next reflection is, I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. So again, this is another one of these reflections, which is just about the uh, our condition as humans. This is about having these bodies and having these lives as a person. Is at some point, we're going to get sick. Again, the Buddha had, when he was before he had started practicing, he said he had the intoxication of health. And so when you're healthy, again, we don't really feel we're going to get sick. And and some people are sick much more than other people. It's all a very personal thing based on our physiology, based on our karma. It's all very personal. But eventually we do get sick. Everyone does get sick at one point. But one of the things you hear is, when someone does get something big, someone has a heart attack or someone gets cancer or diabetes or something like this, you know, there's always that feeling of, "Oh, I can't believe this happened to me. Um, why did this happen to me?" Or they start feeling it very personally, like this is just something bad about me. This is just something bad which has happened to me. But this is just the human condition. We've all got something. We'll all at some point go through this. So this is something, it's important for us to reflect on. And I noticed it was something very interesting I observed was, during the period of the pandemic, where um, it was really on people's consciousness about getting sick. And, people were reflecting on this. And this, became something that a lot of people were starting to see that, yeah, it is possible to get sick. I can get sick, and so it started to affect people. But now, a few years after the pandemic, a lot of people have kind of forgotten that. Some haven't, but a lot of people have kind of forgotten that, went back to normal. And this really shows about the difference in the depths of reflection and the depths of realization. So, the Buddha had said that there's, these three different levels of wisdom or three different levels of understanding. You've got Sutta Maya Panya, which is just the level of wisdom you get from having heard something. Um, and then a deeper level from that is called Chintamaya Panya. So this is the level of understanding you get from really like having thought something through, having contemplated it and really, really analyzed it in your mind. But then the third level, the really deep level, and this is, what we're going for in our practice, is what's called Bhavana Mayapanya. So this is the type of wisdom and understanding we actually get through our meditation. And this is when it really gets deep and really starts to affect us. So that's, when we do those reflections where we don't forget it afterwards, it does start to really change and really uproot some of um our own mental defilements, our own kilesas. And so the next one the Buddha had us reflect on is, I am of the nature to die. And so this is, and I know I've spoken about before, but this is, just death contemplation. Again, it's very real. Death is just part of our human condition. But most people don't want to hear about that. You don't want to think, oh, I'm I'm gonna die sometime. And again, the Buddha, when he was a layman before he started practicing, he had the intoxication of life. Like when you're alive, you never feel, something is going to happen to you. You never feel you're going to die, or you kind of maybe feel that, death is reserved for older people. That's what happens when you get old. But, it can really happen at any time. It could happen walking down the street, driving, especially driving in Winnipeg, um, ice and angry drivers, not a great combination, And so, yeah, it's something, it can happen at any time. And you actually, it's interesting to see sometimes when people do have a real close call with death, can really change their life, and or like a near death experience. So when we reflect on death, it can really give us some perspective on life, especially, say you're getting worked up with someone at work, you're getting frustrated over something minor they've done, and you really think like, I'm going to die one day. What is this going to matter when I die? So it can really change your perspectives on life and change these things we're attached to, good or bad things we're attached to. So these first three reflections, the old age, sickness, and death, these ones are really about our bodies, about our life, about just the condition of being human, these things which happen when you're human. I've heard it used a few times in certain Buddhist circles, people referring to each other as brothers and sisters in old age, sickness, and death. And you first hear that, you're like, wow, that's dark. That's some kind of like, depressive poetry or something like that. But it's really not. It's really, pointing on that we go through and we're all going through the same experience. We go through the same type of difficulties and suffering. So it's similar like when someone has usually it's like some kind of medical problem or some kind of problem in life like that. They sometimes form support groups over it because having other people who have gone through your shared experience and know the pain, the suffering you're going through, know the difficulties you're going through, and can understand that. And, they work in these support groups to help each other, to support each other, to deal with this. And, having other people who understand is really important. So for us, it's like that too, because we all have the same condition of old age, sickness, and death. So we are able to relate to each other over this and understand, yeah, we're all going through this, or we're all at some point going to have to go through this. So I thought that was an interesting reflection on those first three. But then the fourth one is all that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. And and again, this is a really powerful reflection and can really work at us and work away at our attachments, especially our attachments to things in the world, to material things, to people, to situations like jobs and that, because we like to feel a certain sense of security and stability in them. But all these things are also of the nature to decay and end. So it's not always permanent. We're not always going to have it. I really like this teaching. It's one of the really well-known ones from Lumpur Cha, is this, the glass is already broken. So it was just to reflect on that, when you have a glass, like a glass of water, that's just its nature is going to break. It's going to break. It just, it can't last forever. And so just to reflect on it before, well, it's basically already broken because it will break. So then when it does end up breaking, we've already reflected on that and we already understand okay, yeah, that's just what it does. So we're not so hurt. We're not so like there's not the same emotional effect of it when it does actually break. And it can also, reflecting this way, we can really it can help us with our lives and finding the kind of what's important in life. Because a lot of times, we are chasing after getting material things or getting experiences, and that thrill of buying something, and then it can go, it can be lost. So for example, your goal might have been all your life is I want to own this fancy sports car. And you've had your mind set on it. This is your goal. You're working really hard towards it. You're doing overtime, scrimping and saving, not spending on anything else in your life. And you finally buy that fancy car you wanted, and okay, my dreams come true. And then, a couple days later, you're out driving, you get in an accident, and it's a complete write-off, and it's like it can happen, but again, if you've been reflecting on that, maybe getting that car won't have that same importance to you. And so, you're just kind of preparing yourself for these situations in life. And then the fifth of these reflections is about karma. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of this I will be the heir. So karma, or in Sanskrit, karma. Karma is, when you reflect on this and you start reflecting on, my actions have results. I'm going to get the results of these actions I do. It can really, really change the way you behave, the way you speak, the way you act, the way you think. So, if say someone does something bad to you, a lot of times, they say something to you, they do something to you. A lot of the times there's this kind of like this feeling of you want to get even, you want to get revenge, you want to get back at them. And so it doesn't necessarily mean like some big, epic like movie style revenge. Sometimes it's just even just like, someone says something hurtful to you, you want to say something hurtful back, or someone does something to you, and you want to get back at them, kind of, you want to make things even. You made me feel this way, so I want to make you feel that way. But when you really reflect on karma and you're like, okay, well, if I do that, I'm going to be making bad karma. Do I really want to make that type of bad karma? Do I want to have to reap the results of that in the future? And then also, when you're reflecting on that, for the person too, it's like, well, I don't need to do anything to get back at him. You know, he'll have karma from whatever actions he's done. His karma is going to be his business, and he'll get the results of that. And for me, I have to look after my karma and look after myself. So these 5 subjects, we do in our morning and evening chanting in the monastery, and these things that the Buddha encouraged us to reflect on too. And then when we do start reflecting on these, they do start changing our life, start changing our aims and values, those things we hold important in life, start changing our actions for the better. And so, but it's important when we are doing these reflections, especially on stuff like death, um, that to really watch the results we're getting from it, because sometimes, especially if for certain character types, if we start reflecting on death really, really hard, we might find that the next day we're a little depressed or a little down. These reflections, they should be making us feel usually more light, less burdened. And so it's really important to watch those and watch the results you're getting from those. So I would like to offer that to everyone as a bit of a reflection for this evening.